Constantinople, now it's Istanbul. Now Constantinople, been a long time gone. Constantinople, now it's Turkish delight on a moonlit night.
If you'd like to contact the show, send us an email at liveonfourlegspodcast@gmail.com or get involved in the conversation on social media. Join the Pearl Jam Podcast community group on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at liveonfourlegspod.
Is that strange, like going to like very foreign places where they're really into it and don't speak English? All I know is from like comedies where they'll dub them and then you watch and the jokes have all been changed and the voices are changed and it doesn't even feel like the movie. And
yeah,
it's but how is it for you with a totally foreign crowd?
Well, I'll never forget playing Istanbul the first time we played, well, maybe the only time we played Istanbul, and just seeing all these people singing, probably phonetically, but singing along with great intensity and passion. And I thought it was really one of those moments where you were kind of wondering, how did we get here?
Yeah.
And away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the live Pearl Jam podcast experience, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Fucking Cameron in the drum. Mr. Boom Gasper. You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
Hey everybody now, welcome to Live on Four Legs, the definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. And boy, I hate to say this because it has been just a phenomenal year getting a new album, getting to discover new songs live, getting to meet new people on tour. And I hate the fact that for the time being, it's done, it's over, because it really felt like we were on a journey with this, just every single night for a while, getting to find out what the set lists were, whether it be near or far, just getting to hear people's reaction and getting to talk about it and getting to talk about the set list. That is why we exist. And I mean, we as a collective, we, not just we as a podcast. That's obviously why we exist. But I think just the reaction that everybody had to the Australia and New Zealand shows and keeping up with that, it gave me hope. And I don't mean that as like a surprising thing, but you know, sometimes in the past I've noticed that if it's not in your natural vicinity, if it's not in your hometown, then maybe you don't gravitate towards it as much. But I think now that we are all kind of closer to this, even though that the time zones are different and things like that, I think that we are all following along. And I hope that what we've done here is kind of pushed that element along and help people realize that it's not just what's in front of you, but it's what's all around you. So sad that it's gone. We'll give a little bit of a recap of things. But today, and the topic for the episode, because this is Thanksgiving week, we decided to go to, well, Turkey. That was sort of pre-planned, but I'd forgotten that I did that. So Istanbul from 1996. This is the one and only time they ever played Istanbul. That is not the last time I'll do that, and I don't give a rat's ass. So you're just going to have to live with it. And you know what else you're going to have to live with? We're all going to have to live with the bootleg that's not quite up to the standard of any era. It's obviously not a place where a lot of popular tapers were going around and taping shows. So we're just going to play with what we got here. And honestly, what we got, we have a lot of great content that I didn't think would come out of this, and a lot of stories and a lot of performances that I had no idea even existed. And I'm glad that we're going to be able to put this in your forefront right now and give you, hopefully expand your mind to all this and expose you to new stuff, even though it's been almost 30 years since it's all happened. So let's dig in. Randy Sobel over here, John Farrar over there.
Hello, hello.
Hi. Let's start with kind of an ending recap here. I know we talked a lot about it. Well, Javier and I were on the last episode of the reaction, so we didn't quite get to hear your reaction on stuff like Hunger Strike and things like that. So it's worth mentioning, but also overall, in the grand scheme of things, like, what did this year do for us? Where did this take us? And did we hit all the expectations that we had for Dark Matter in the very beginning?
Yeah, I think that we did, and I think they played a lot of shows this year, the most they'd played in a long time, in a year. We had like 7 months of Pearl Jam shows, something like that, on and
Yeah.
off.
From May to November,
And
right?
we got to like see it move as the year went on. You got a long tour, so we got to track trends, and this song's coming in here, and this song's falling out of favor, but this one's jumping in. And some of the Dark Matter stuff, it's so interesting. Like, for a long time, they were doing that block with the first four, and then they started to break that up, and then you started to see React Respond would be the first one played, and then they would work in. They found a spot for some of those, like Running was played a lot early on, and then it kind of fell off. Setting Sun, the way that Setting Sun started out with the closing and the whole surprise thing, that was awesome. And then we saw that kind of fall off, kind of fell out of favor a little bit, but something like Won't Tell came on late and got played a little more than we'd expected early on. And Waiting for Stevie, it took a while for them to warm up on that one, but we saw that get some play. And then Got to Give getting played at the first weekend and then not coming back until the last was interesting. And each song on that record had like a trajectory, like an up and down throughout the whole year. That was really interesting to see. And then the big one people are going to remember is Whale Song and Grammy Out of Control from Ohana, because those were like the big OTOTOs. And I think that is something that people were really clamoring for this year. Is like, oh, what's this year going to be remembered for? I think it's going to be those tracks. And then, of course, Hunger Strike from Sydney at the last show is like, I think we had talked about it when we did that Bridge School episode, like, oh, I don't think they're ever going to do this again. Like, they just can't. But giving it to the crowd and letting that crowd take it is just a really special gift for like the last show, to be like, here's something that no one else got that we saved for you guys. I think that's really, really nice. Like I said last week, I just hope that they are going to take this momentum and build on it. Like, let's not take 2 years off. Let's get back and let's go to some different places this year and keep this momentum going. That's just what I want to see, is let's take this momentum and do something with it.
Depending on who you ask, it does feel like, and granted, you take things for a grain of salt, but the overall consensus of what would happen in 2025, and I've seen things from certain people that said, I know somebody who like works with Live Nation, and they say they're on tour with them, and they say that they're booked with Pearl Jam through 2025. And I can believe that, because I think that there's still work to do in this. I think that there's still places that deserve to see them in the US and South America, especially. I think that needs to happen pretty soon, because it's been a while since they've gone back down there, especially Argentina, that has missed a show back in 2018. So it'll be 10 years since they've been to one of the best Pearl Jam cities of all time. I am pretty confident that it's going to happen. In what capacity? I have no idea. I have no idea if it's going to be a 10-show tour in May or if it's going to be another September run again. I don't know, but I think we have a lot to look forward to. All right. Well, now we're going to go back to 28 years ago, at a time where Pearl Jam was not working with venue like Live Nation. They were not using Live Nation. They weren't using really anybody that was in the Ticketmaster realm because they were on a Ticketmaster band, but they were also doing the US shows as well as Europe. And it had been 4 years since they had been to Europe. Well, no, I should say it had been 3 years since they've been to Europe because they were in Europe in 1993, but a lot of those shows were little festival gigs, opening up for Neil, opening up for U2, and a couple of smaller gigs here and there. But those don't really get talked about a whole lot, not anywhere close to as much as the 1992 stuff does. So it'd been 3 years, but a lot of the places that they visited, they went to, obviously, I think the big one is Berlin, and they did Hamburg as well. They went to Dublin, they went to London, they went to Portugal, Spain, Barcelona, Paris. They went to a ton of different places on this run. And it just so happened that Istanbul was one of them. And it's such a weird outlier because you don't necessarily think, well, Turkey is this hotbed for music that they're clamoring for modern rock. Like, I don't know of any other band or artist that will go out there consistently, especially and I don't really know what was going on in Turkey in 1996, but now I think people would want to kind of stay clear of it a little bit. But it's interesting. Like, they were just kind of getting to experience things. Obviously, the year before that was the first time that they toured Japan and the first time that they would tour Australia. And some of those places that they went to, they would never go back to again, like the Philippines and Taiwan and Singapore. And Istanbul fits within that category of just being this sort of outlier place in their catalog.
Yeah, there's not a lot of information about this show, but if you look on some of the YouTube clips, if you look at the comments, of course, you can see people from Turkey. You'll see that, like, people, oh, I was at the show, I remember this. And there are some people that were on there, oh, I was there, and they're either typing in the Turkish language, which you have to translate, or they're typing in broken English. But there's a lot of like, oh, I slept outside the venue the night before, and I was so excited, and we can't believe that they came, and there was all this thing, and there was a whole rush when they went on, and like, you get the feeling that the kids there were very excited that Pearl Jam is going to get there, because like I said, I don't think a lot of bands go there, and like, there's almost kind of like a romanticism to the bootleg as well, because they can look on the lineage of the boot that I have. Like, this was recorded on a microphone into a Walkman. And like, I just picture some kid being very excited to be part of this thing that he's heard of and like seen on the internet in the fledgling, whatever form of the internet we had back then. And to be like, I'm going to do that. I've got my Walkman. I've got a little mic. Otherwise, we would have nothing from this show. It just made me kind of really happy to think of some young person being really excited to like sneak their microphone and Walkman in and record this thing and probably go back and listen to it a bunch of times. And yeah, the quality's not great, but there's a certain something to it that makes up for it.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's 1996. That's like the year that AOL blew up. And
Yeah.
I have no information on whether the internet was popular in Turkey, whether it was widespread, because it felt like here in the States, it was barely widespread. I can speak to my experiences, but I didn't know what the internet was until my dad said that he installed it on the computer. But I was also 10 years old, so I wasn't quite there yet. But as a country, that's where we were. So I have no idea. But to that point, this person who recorded the show should be considered a local legend, because every show since about 1995, there's like one or two 1995 shows. I think one of them might have been in Taipei that we have no bootleg for. I think years ago that we got the set list information, but we don't have a bootleg. And that would be the last known show to not have any recording of. And this could have easily been one of those shows where we didn't have anything. This is a show where 4,000 people showed up. I briefly spoke to Amy, who you might know from Umbrella Watch fame. And when we had her on the show a couple of years ago, like 2 years ago or so, she was talking about the first time that they were really traveling was this tour in Europe in 1996. And she had messaged on Blue Sky, because we're on there now. Please follow us on there. We've got a good crew going on. And she had mentioned that she was disappointed that her and her crew decided to skip Istanbul. And it was just probably because it's not on somebody's mind. Like, they're going to go to, I think, Barcelona right after this, if I'm not mistaken. And if you want to save the travel money, then you go straight to Barcelona, a place that is a lot more travel friendly. And I don't know from their situation, but to know that, I think tells you that they were making the conscious decision to leave that one out, because it might have just been easier to go in another direction. So there probably were not a lot of people outside of the local residents that were there. They do have one piece of video footage for this, for Hail Hail, and it's very interesting. I don't know who shot it, but somebody decided that they wanted to see the lighting rig a lot more than we should have. So when we get to Hail Hail, we'll actually play a significant amount of it, because that is the only legit performance that we have that doesn't sound like it's, being traveled through a paper towel roll.
If you look at a map of Europe, I can place the main ones that I kind of know, but I'm not a cartographer by any means. But looking at where Istanbul is on a map, you're almost in the Middle East there. Like, Turkey borders Syria and Iraq and Iran. Like, they had just played Budapest the show before, a couple of days before, and you've got to go all the way through Romania, all the way through Bulgaria, going southeast to get to Istanbul. Like, it's a long way out of the way. And then to get to Spain 2 days later, you've got to cross like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 countries to get there. I can understand why people back then, you would look at this and be like, yeah, maybe that's one we're not going to make it to, because it's further out than they've ever been before. Obviously, they've never gone into Africa or played in the Middle East or Russia or anything, but this is about as close as you get.
My geography is so bad that I think I convinced myself that Turkey was close to India, and that is beyond what reality is, because and that's just because I just didn't know. And yeah, I did look on the map too, and I saw it's next to Iran. I'm like, ooh, that's you just don't consider that, especially considering that the band played right next to it. Is a little not something that they would probably do now. Obviously, for them, it's a travel experience too, and it's an opportunity to explore the world where, if they weren't in this band, it would have been more than a pipe dream. Okay, well, we're going to make this pipe dream come to life. The 4,000 fans that were in attendance were very excited for this. There are times where you can hear them sing, and even with the crappy bootleg, we're going to get to them, and we're going to have things to talk about, things to listen to too. I won't really splice in long clips here. Maybe in 1 or 2 cases I will, because I know it's not easy to listen to, so we'll spare your ears a little bit, but let's dig into the show, because I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. To open up the show, the crowd is really loud as the band goes onto stage. So the way that they're going to start, I mean, it's no surprise if you're going to open the show for the majority of times in America, for the majority of times in Europe, Australia, South America, Japan, there's going to be a release. Why not enter Istanbul and say, hey, we're going to give you exactly what everybody else gets to experience from this band for the first time. Yeah, little bits and pieces that you're able to decipher from these songs. I think the feel that I got off a release, and granted, sometimes when you have a bootleg that is not of top quality, the sound can kind of, I guess, get a little drowned out a little bit. It has some wear and tear on it, but the wear and tear that might have been on release made it feel kind of like a dream sequence type version. It's kind of floating a little bit. And the song has tended to do that in the past. Although when you listen to some other versions, maybe you're able to get a little bit more depth into that, where it's a little less simplistic. Like you can't hear any bass from this. You can't decipher between which guitars are which too often unless it's very obvious. So when listening to this, I kind of felt like it was floating a little bit. It felt like a dreamy version of release.
Yeah, you can tell that Ed is in a mood, and I don't mean like a bad mood. Like you can tell he's taking it all in. There's a clip too from the Lightning Bolt interviews where Judd Apatow is interviewing the band, and he asks them, "Oh, what's it like to kind of go to these foreign countries and hear them sing your music back to you?" And Ed answers, and he specifically mentions this show. He's like, "Yeah, they're singing along phonetically." He's like, "I'll never forget that Istanbul show. The only time we've ever been there." And I think you can tell that he knew that this was going to be a rare occasion. I think that's why you get released. It definitely fits the big moment there. And this venue too, it's the World Trade Center. It looks like this
Weird
like
saying that,
giant.
huh?
Yeah, I know, right? It has different meaning now, but it looks like this kind of monolith looking office building type of thing, and it just must have been surreal to be there. And that's part of it too, is they were just kind of like in a daze. Like he says in that clip, "Man, how did we get here? What is going on?" It's got that kind of an energy. I think with release, they're just kind of not sure what the energy is going to be like in the crowd, and then they get this massive reaction and people singing along, which they probably didn't expect, and you could tell there's like a tension on stage.
Yeah, the sense that I got from the venue that they were in, it felt a little more like an auditorium than a theater. Like theater, it feels like it has layers to it. And granted, you don't see a whole lot. It just kind of felt like the floor and that was it. And it looks pretty tight up there. So you get what you get from some places. And I've seen it in other places that are completely random where bands have had to play basically in nothing. In places like in Africa, some bands have gone down to places in Africa played, and it's a lot worse than that. So this is what we're working with here. And the way that they follow up release is to go into three songs that work very, very well together: Last Exit, Hail Hail, and Animal. Now, Last Exit, I think, is just really tough because that song naturally is all drums. So when you have a bootleg that isn't up to par, the drums are going to drown out just about nearly everything. And it happens on some songs. We're going to get into Tremor Christ in My Tree. There are a couple other songs that come later where the drums will really be prominent. And then later on in the set too, we'll be able to kind of decipher a little bit more than we did in the beginning. It feels like the quality does just get a tad bit better later on, but maybe that's, again, getting used to it a little bit. But Last Exit, can't really decipher what's going on there. However, as mentioned before, Hail Hail is our only real indication to hear how the band was gelling at this show. And because we have the full version of it, I think we just need to roll right through it. So Hail Hail to the lucky ones that were able to record this. So, what did you get from the general mood, like the band on stage, the feel, the vibe, the way that Ed shrieking into the microphone? It didn't feel like they felt lost out there, when in some places that might feel uncomfortable to them, maybe they are.
Yeah, Ed was definitely being more emotive and doing like little things with his hands and like kind of punching his hand with his other hand and trying to feed off the energy of the crowd. But I think there's still a little tension. Mike and Jeff are not looking out at the crowd. I think they were still kind of feeling it out this early on, but we got to talk about what Jack is doing here. The real only time you get the details of what he's doing, and Jack on Hail Hail is fantastic. There's a part right before they go into the bridge where he does a little fill, a little rhythmic thing that's just like, oh man, it's so good. You miss that from Hail Hail in the later eras, but just because of the quality of it, this is definitely a highlight.
So Ed finishes off the song, as you heard, with doing that cha-cha-cha, doing a little bit of that thing. And then as you hear Animal kind of kick in, the guitar sound a little bit better there. You feel the energy. Mike is tremendous. And once again, it just bleeds into the ending chorus, as we've talked about with Mike's solo before, when Mike's solo isn't contained. And we talk about sometimes Stone solo on Do the Evolution, the second solo, where Stone won't stop when it comes into getting back into the verse. He'll just keep rolling with it because he's on something. It feels like Mike, more often than not, can do that in Animal as well, where he'll just have some carryover into the ending there. So, Tremor Christ and In My Tree here, diversity in the first four songs, with Release, Last Exit, Hail Hail, and Animal being one off of every single album. I don't know if that is done purposefully or done for a reason, but is interesting to make note of. Tremor Christ here does feel like a little bit faster. Again, it might be sound quality, it might just be how it was stored over the years, but it does feel a little bit faster than Vitalogy era versions. It feels like Jack was really just had a pounding presence on this. And one of the things that you really love out of Tremor Christ, I think we've mentioned the last couple of weeks that we've had it, is just the bass is so bouncy and prominent, and you lose a little bit of that when you don't have the best recording of it. Ed's vocals sounded really good. And I think one thing that maybe we don't talk about enough with Tremor Christ in this era, when he does the bridge line, the I'll decide, take my time, like that is one of the best vocal performances that can come out of 1995, 1996. It's tremendous what he's able to do on that. I don't know why people don't salivate over that part more, because it is a fantastic moment for this song.
Song is so underrated. I mean, there's a reason it always gets a big reaction when they play it now, and we saw that this year the few times that they did it. But this performance of Ed, you can tell like he's starting to feel it a little bit, like he's starting to get what he's looking for out of this crowd, I think, because there's a moment late on when he's singing and he kind of goes into the speak singing thing that he will do on Jeremy sometimes, but I think it's done here to kind of add some gravitas and add some extra feeling to it. It sounded really good. And Ed is obviously the focal point because we can hear him better than anyone else. But yeah, I was really impressed with him on this version. It sounded like they were kind of starting to feel it a little bit and kind of reacting to the energy of the crowd.
In My Tree, to follow up, again, percussion. And you're just going to get that kind of Jack intro that's an absolute monster. seen versions like this before where Jack just has that intro where he's just going off. It feels like a jungle beat. And that's exactly what happens here. As for the version, it can get very soaring in this. And I think when you have, just cut, copy, paste here, when you have a bootleg that is not of the quality, the percussion is going to be heavy, heavy influence in this. So you hear that, but you also kind of hear the drums creating a soaring aspect to this.
We've heard other versions from around this era, of course, and we know how good they sound. We know what Jack can do. But yeah, I mean, if you want to get the feeling for what the bootleg sounds like, just go start your car, and it basically sounds like it's that when the drums kick in. But yeah, I mean, it's all about that last minute or so when it opens up. Mike comes in over top of everything, and yeah, it's one of the best moments they have.
After the song, Ed kind of screams something that was completely inaudible. Most of what he says at the show is very inaudible, and he doesn't say too much. Because again, it wasn't at the time where he is learning these languages and he's speaking to the crowd in their language. He would decide to do that later. So not a lot of interaction in this at all, but apparently a fan had made their way onto the stage, and as they were taken off, Ed says, "Pleased to meet you." So it's interesting because a lot of the other places, Japan had that issue where people were running onto the stage. It might just be one of those things that they want to be so close to their idols that it kind of doesn't feel real to them. It's like their only opportunity to basically get on stage like that. It does feel like when you're in some other places that they're very intense when it comes to like be face to face with these people. And that can be very uncomfortable for bands.
That's the MTV influence. They had MTV Europe. They've seen the videos. They know how to behave at these shows. They've seen it. So they're acting out what they've seen on MTV.
All right, this section here is going to be Corduroy, Small Town, and then Habit. A lot of good clapping in the build up to Corduroy. Very tight version that feels very anthemic too. And I think the identity for it is still continuing to develop into becoming anthemic. And I think once it comes, they play it almost every show in 1998, if not every show. And then 2000, I think you really find where this song stands. And I think at this time, I'm sure they really, really feel it. How could they not? But before thinking about this being an anthemic song, it feels, especially on the record, like a very garage rock song. So they're able to kind of transfer that and kind of create some tension, create some big moments in this is what separates this from where it started on the record. And I think that they're just starting to get to in this. Jack and Mike working very, very well in tandem with this. Jack is really hitting hard in this, and even feels like Mike went for like a full Eddie Van Halen move in this, just tons of wah pedal and very close to being like adjacent to Eruption almost.
Back in the late 95 tour, they were really stretching this out with Jack. I think there's a couple versions that are like 6-7 minutes long where they would just take that ending and just let it ride. The ending on this version is very, very good as well, like I said, with Mike and Jack together. After the solo, when the song normally ends and you get that little extra, like, oh, here we go, we're going to push it a little bit. You get that excitement from it, like, oh, we're going to get something we don't always get. And you just get a little tease of it and then it ends, and that's very, very good.
So continuing on, Small Town. I love when Small Town is in that pre 1 2 3 4 2 3 era because we get that pretty little intro into the song. almost short-lived a little bit, because I think in 1998 is really when 1 2 3 4 2 3 really kind of came into fruition and been the staple intro for that song. So there's this little time period where they weren't playing the song too much after Verses had come out. And the intro, it's just very pretty. It has like this beautiful develop into it. And I love hearing that because we just don't hear it that often. And it's such a unique way of doing it, especially what we know now. But yeah, heartfelt version. It felt like a nice moment for this show for sure. And only the 57th time playing it in 4 years. That's not a whole lot with the amount of shows that they were doing. But also, they hadn't played it in 12 shows prior to this one. So
Yeah.
Habit on top of that is a juxtaposition after Small Town. The speaking of bit turns into speaking as a tourist. So that's a sign that, yeah, they were probably walking around during the day and looking at things and trying to get a feel for the area that they're probably never going to return back to. And at the end of that, it feels like we get this massive scorcher of a solo out of Mike, and it all of a sudden just cuts off, which is strange. I don't know if that's by design or just kind of falls apart, but that's what happens.
Yeah, there's a long break in Habit 2 before he gets to the speaking as line. I picture him just like taking in the crowd and looking at everything and having a moment there, because it goes on for much, much longer than it normally does before he finally kicks back in, and then the band just tears it apart at the end there. I mean, we saw what Liam Finn adds to the song in Australia this year, and he's got that kind of manic energy that the song was missing for a long time, but this one definitely had it, you can tell.
So our next section is going to be a barrage of big hit songs. Even Flow, Daughter, Jeremy. This is the crowd that deserves these kind of songs, that are waiting for these kind of songs. And Even Flow, you're able to hear there's a little bit of singing on. You're definitely able to hear it on Jeremy as well. And there's some songs later, I think Alive being one of them, you're absolutely able to hear it. So Even Flow, thought it sounded pretty good. Ed did something vocally before the song started, but we have no idea what that could have been. So that's just kind of left off the cutting room floor, I suppose. But the solo's right on the mark, very, very close to the certain kind of sound and tone that Mike usually goes for on this. The build back is great. You don't hear a lot of things clearly, but you apparently hear the Never Vote Republican very clearly, which we never actually hear on bootlegs that sound terrific. That's a weird little thing. But also, Daughter, I can give it to you to talk about the Sonic Youth tags and that, and then we can talk a little bit about Jeremy.
The Daughter tags, yeah, they do 2 Sonic Youth songs. Androgynous Mind, of course, they've done a bunch of times. But Bull and the Heather as well, which was kind of the current Sonic Youth single from Experimental Jet Set, which had come out like a year or two before. Both of those songs are from, actually. And I think that's a part of Ed wanting to bring Sonic Youth to Istanbul when he couldn't bring them literally, so he's going to bring them in spirit a little bit. And I think that's a little bit of like, hey, maybe the Turks in the crowd will hear that and maybe they'll go look up what it was and find that record and find Sonic Youth. He kind of likes to be the Johnny Appleseed of underground music and kind of spread these little seeds wherever he goes. And I think that's why you get the 2 Sonic Youth songs there. I think that's done very much on purpose.
Yeah, I have no idea what Sonic Youth's popularity was or still is over there, but one of the things with the tags, it's so hard, and we've talked about this before in kind of the early internet phase. Nobody is looking up those lyrics like we can now. You hear some lyrics, you're like, oh, shit, okay, that's a Taylor Swift song. I didn't know that. Back then, I don't even know if that's something, especially for a crowd that is not fluent in English, I don't know if that's something that they retain. So yes, Johnny Appleseed, that's the premise of wanting to do it, but I'm unsure if something like that would stick.
Did they have 120 minutes on MTV Europe? I don't know. Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah, who knows? Who knows what they do out there? But Jeremy, I think, to me, I'm on like a Jeremy kick right now. I have no idea why. I've been watching videos from this past year, and Jeremy has just been a barn burner lately. So I've really kind of gravitated towards it. And look, when you get a crowd singing along every word, 90% of the people there probably figured out about this band when Jeremy was massive or right after it was massive, whenever it happened. But look, this is such an exciting moment for a crowd like this. The band was still, at that time too, kind of crawling out of this hole that was No Jeremy, that they didn't want to play the real version of the song, that they wanted to separate themselves from it. So they played a weird experimental version of it. But on nights like this, I wonder if they just have to put aside their disdain, and seeing new crowds react to it maybe puts it more in a positive light.
Yeah, I forget if it was Jeff or Stone. Someone had asked him about, kind of the alternative versions of songs that they had played. And he was like, oh, yeah, sometimes you just have to go back to the original and realize that that was the superior version.
That's Jeff quote.
And yeah, Jeff. And I think this year with Jeremy exemplifies that. I mean, there was no way they were getting out of Istanbul without playing Jeremy. It's one that every single person in that crowd can sing phonetically, whether they understand it or not, but they've seen the video, they know it, it was everywhere. The kind of culmination, like you mentioned, these 3 songs, the big hits in the middle here. I think Jeremy finishes that off because they knew that this was going to be the one that was going to connect with people, and they were going to get, again, going back to getting that crowd energy. He knew when he wrote this set list that no matter what happens, I can get to this point and I'll get something that we can build on for the rest of the set.
Now we get to a little section here that would be uncommon as hell nowadays, because it's 2 openers that are dead smack in the middle of a main set. Long Road into Sometimes. Even for a place like Istanbul, you're getting something completely random and something that almost and probably no one has ever gotten outside of this. I think looking at the set list, this is the most fascinating thing to me, because when you're looking down at the songs, you don't know what the performances are going to be like. There's going to be a performance in a couple minutes that we'll talk about that was just completely mind blowing. But when you look at it on paper, it's just a song that closes the set. But this is what was intriguing about this show. So I thought the rendition of Long Road was fascinating because Jack felt a little bit heavier on the rhythm in the intro to the song. And there's something that Ed does like very early, and he doesn't do it a whole lot, but the vocal run that he does like right before kind of the pre-chorus that starts to build, he kind of does this, and that reminded me so much of his version with Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan that I wonder if that was in his mind. And I looked at that map because I wanted to know how close Turkey was to Pakistan, and it's not. So, I don't know if that's something that's just in his mind because that happened in 1996, but it felt like it had a little bit of that vibe that kind of took little bits and pieces of that version and added them into this one.
Yeah, it was definitely an influence. I think he took a lot from that, and you see it pop up in different places around this time. But yeah, Long Road, I think, is definitely the one. They did, like a 15 or 18-minute version of it or something. It's just incredible. But this one, yeah, I think this is another big highlight from this show. You get the crowd clapping along early on, and I think the pacing on this, it's just a tad faster than the version on the EP. which I think gives it a little more energy and a little more push and pull. You're kind of on the ride with it. Gives it a more like you're not like a driving feel, like something like a rearview mirror or a porch will, but like gives it like a momentum that you feel like you're going somewhere with it, and it makes you sit up and take notice a little bit more than some of the more slow burn intense versions of it, which have their own validity of course, but this one felt a little bit different. And I wonder, coming off of something like Jeremy, if they were still feeling a little bit high off of that. And then when it gets to the ending, it gets real quiet and it's almost just kind of seething. I really enjoyed this version. It was very cinematic and just felt like it was going up and down and all over the place. I really, really liked it.
Yeah, that transition, that dead silence, that transitions right into Sometimes is seamless and excellent. This version is Sometimes, again, you're going into something else that is not usually utilized in this role, so it feels a little bit different. The version, honestly, again, with talking about pacing, sped up a little bit, it felt like this almost had the pacing and the push more of what the song would become rather than what it was in 1996. Because in 1996, it was very, very close to what the album version presented, just kind of plodding a little bit slow, just taking its time and easing its way into a set. And in this, it felt like they were right on the verge of wanting to really elevate it and really push it to the top. And they got there to a point where they just hit a ceiling where in versions maybe in like 2000 and 2003, they would shatter that glass ceiling on it. But it was really interesting to see what they were working with here, pushing a song that maybe they were feeling like we're not opening with it. We're going to go right into Rearview Mirror. So it needs a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, the two songs are super interesting together. These are still very early versions. I mean, only the 13th Long Road, the 22nd Sometimes, which feels like a lot even for this era. But getting them together and getting them in this time, like when you're still early on in the cycle of the song, I think adds a lot to it as well because the band is still feeling it out. And like I said, Ed's taking in different influences and they're trying things out with it. And sometimes, later on would build into something else, into this energy, and you can see where some of that started and where it's going to go to. It's interesting to get these two together at this time because I don't think they've ever done anything like this before.
The way that Rearview Mirror kind of follows that up, it's got that like slow, trickle, plucky intro to it. I think you have to kind of slowly evolve out of Sometimes. Sometimes just gets to that edge where it can fit Rearview Mirror, but Rearview Mirror also has to kind of come down to where Sometimes was and pick back up a little bit. It's a very monotone, droning, subdued, semi-experimental bridge that just kind of sits there. And if it's creating tension, to me, it's like, where are they going with this? Is this like a little respite? Is this like a little break? And then you just got to wait for something to erupt with this. And the crowd just kind of starts clapping in unison when that bass buildup happens and it's Rearview Mirror all over again. But this was so stark that it is almost unrecognizable when it comes to bridges.
I miss the really quiet rearview mirror bridges because they don't do that anymore. I think you miss that dynamic of when they would bring it really sparsely down and it would only be just Jeff and Jack just barely holding it together. Yeah, this part they just let it sit and just kind of marinate in it for a little bit like, oh, let's just see what happens if we just hold this right here. And again, you're building up that anticipation of like, oh, when that bass comes in, it's going to just explode. And the longer they let it sit, the more impact that bass is going to have when it comes back in. And yeah, this is very, very well done. We've seen long versions of Rear View Mirror, and then we've seen the just drive and pound it and be unrelenting with it. But I really would like to see this come back. And it's different now. They're playing huge arenas and stadiums, and you've got to fill that space. But I think there's something to be said for like the dynamics of bringing it really, really down like this and just having it go to almost a whisper and then build it all the way back up and see what that can do to a crowd.
The song's evolved. I can't see them going back to that. It's good for its
Yeah.
time period, but I think it needs to be explosive nowadays. That's just how it's going to be, especially that they don't play it every night, and it's kind of considered a treat to get that instead of Porch, even though we saw a lot of times in sets recently that Porch and Rearview Mirror were played in the same night. There's a bit of a cliche that goes along with that. But feeling good energy on Better Man after that. You really have a murderer's row of songs to end this main set with Rearview Mirror, Better Man. Then it's going to be Alive, and the song that's going to be talked about here, Blood. So yeah, especially after last week's rendition of Better Man, after a full calendar year, it feels like they've really turned this into the hit that it should be. So Ed says, "You survived tonight. Are you okay?" And it feels like he says, "Don't quit anything," going into Alive. And once again, good singing on Alive. They're going to want to hear this song. You shouldn't be surprised by that anymore. This is obviously a crowd that knows the band and is very excited for them. And although we don't really know much about them, they know more about the band than we do about them. So I think that's kind of what matters. And that's the element of surprise. And that's what pushes things here. And yeah, this is Mike taking the platform for himself too. Whenever he can just put on a clinic, he just goes for it. And I think that's what Alive has here. But I'm like kind of cliff noting this because I really think that we got to get into Blood. So Ed graciously thanks the crowd and says we've really enjoyed this night, and then pulls right into Blood, which is absolutely just fired up from the jump. Yeah, it feels like it hits you over the head with a steel chair. Like, that's what you're getting from that. Now, the clip that the MP3 is, time-wise, is 9 minutes and 30 seconds. And this is ending the main set. So in my eyes, I thought, okay, well, it's probably like a 3 or 4 minute version. And then we're going to get the encore break that's a part of that. That seems pretty standard because there was no encore break track within this bootleg. But to my pleasant surprise, oh, no. This is so much different. This bridge, and it's Ed just kind of milking the crowd, getting everybody clapping again and into it. There's a fame tag there, but it just, after the fame tag, you think that's the transition point. This thing just keeps moving on. He goes, hey, like he does all the little things. He's just keeping it going. The band is finding different ways to kind of implement new things. And my point on this is that, like, I get that nobody's going to talk about this show because the way that you talk about it is that people that were there. And it's going to be very rare that you know somebody that's from this show. So you, like you mentioned before, you look at the YouTube clips and you see on the comments people that were there and you get a little bit of that experience. But I get that nobody wants to talk about it because they wouldn't know to go to this because of the bootleg quality and everything like that. But this is what you're missing when you don't go to shows like this. This is why the idea of the podcast overall wants to cover everything, because you don't know by looking at the set list, and especially Five Horizons had no information for this essentially. This is an 8-minute version of Blood, and it's fucking massive. 8 minutes long, and it brought the fucking house down in Istanbul, Turkey.
Yeah, I mean, it's the showstopper. This is what you paid your money to go see. We talked about it earlier. Maybe it took him a few songs to kind of feel out this crowd, and maybe the band wasn't sure what they were going to get in a place like this. But by the time you get to Blood, they're firing on all cylinders, as they say. Like, they've torn this place apart. The length of it, I think, is, again, we talked about it on Rearview Mirror and Corduroy, where they just will sit in this for a minute and let's just see what happens. But with Blood, you get the feeling where we've locked into something here and we don't want it to stop. Like, I think they could have gone on for even longer. But yeah, I think this is one of the longest ones I can think of. Istanbul Blood is going to probably become a thing now as we compare other things to it. But yeah, just an absolutely monstrous way to end a set.
It seemed pretty obvious to me that this was the one. Look, Jeremy and Alive, like those are performances that they're there for, but I think Blood is definitely the one that they're going to come back and tell all their friends that go back and listen to this on Versus. So now we're at the encore, so let's pause for station identification. We got some things to talk about here, some updates, and especially a little bit on Patreon because we finished up the React Response series for the year, of course, and the last episode is tremendous because we got a lot of great analysis from the friends out on site. And once again, I said it during that episode, Chris Warren, Carolyn Vader Ritter, William Reese, Brad Arundel, Gianluca, they were fucking rock stars this whole entire tour, like relentlessly. It is not an easy task to go out there after a show and try to get people to talk because people after shows, they're like, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I got to get to my car, I got to do this, I got to do that, I'm going to wait for a train, on and on and on. They don't want to stick around. And if they do, then they're waiting for people. Everybody's got an agenda afterwards. So they were able to find people. People gravitated towards them, and they all talked about the show, and they all became good friends. And it was great to see that they had a day in between where they all got to hang out and just share stories together. And I'm just so proud of what happened over there. And they are absolutely terrific, wonderful people. And if you get a chance to ever talk to them, just thank them for what they did because it's truly tremendous. So a lot of new patrons this week checking out, of course, a lot of Australian patrons that we're going to thank right here, checking out all of the React Respond episodes. So let's start and thank Johnny McKibben, Daz, Jacob Malone, Christy McCosh, Misha Bevan, Bakes, Clinton Sutton, Jason Lynch, James Dilger, and Keaton Rattray. Thank you all for joining up on Patreon. And hey, I know that you guys joined up for the reaction episodes, and that's all right, but consider sticking around, guys, because we can use the help, and there's also going to be more content coming over there very, very soon. So, like the Gear Garage, Javier is working very hard on the 3rd edition of the Dark Matter Gear Garage trilogy. So that'll be the last 3 songs of the album that we're going to get into here. I can't wait to see what he has to say on Setting Sun. That should be really exciting. And there'll be more. There will be more in the future. We have other ideas that we're going to get to very, very soon. There's an idea kind of stewing on right now. We'll see if it comes to fruition. But honestly, if it doesn't come to fruition, there are about 100 episodes over there that you can go back on and listen to that are all wonderful. They're all tremendous. What, am I going to say something bad about my own content? No. Evolution episodes, Bridge School episodes, TV, late night series, the works. So if you have something that you wanted to listen to, you can look. There's playlists on the site. Go check them out. And yeah, we hope that you guys can stick around and continue to help us through this whole thing because that is extremely important to us. So if you yourself have thought about becoming a patron and want to take advantage of all of the episodes and exclusive content that I just mentioned, then head on over to patreon.com/live on 4 legs, or you download the Patreon app and search for Live on 4 legs, or you go to liveon4legs.com and click the Become a Patron button at the top. Okay, so now I want to get into something here because this is something we do every year. So after every tour year, I guess this is the third year that we've done this, we have put together the best of list, the best of the year. And the list is finalized. There's some people that are working on their write-ups right now. I have a couple at this moment, and this is a couple of days before this comes out, so I don't know what's going to happen later on, but I have a couple that are still open. If anybody's interested in writing about, please get in touch on Facebook, on any means of social media. I'd be happy to give you the list and hopefully get you signed up and aboard. We'd love to get some more participation on that. But it's going to be a little bit different this year because, yeah, there'll be a write-up and it'll be on liveonfourlegs.com. But what we're going to end up doing is something a little bit different. There's going to be two parts. It's going to be 50 through 26, and that'll come out on a Monday in December. And then I guess that day is probably the 16th. Yeah, I guess it's the 16th of December that'll come out. And then on the 19th of December, keep that date in mind, keep it open, because that is going to be the date of our holiday party. And not just that, but I spoke to somebody and told them about what we were doing. And she was like, oh, that's great. I can't wait to listen to the episode on this. And I thought to myself, oh, crap, we have not been doing this as a podcast. We've just been doing this as a website feature. And maybe it's time to add a little bit of the podcast flavor into this. So as most of you know that following along for the last couple of years, the last episode of the year is usually the Hall of Fame episode. And instead of it being the Hall of Fame episode this year, we're going to bunch it together. And the way that we're going to do that is when we release the final 25, the top 25, it'll be during the holiday party. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically just talk about it with everybody. We're going to get everybody's take and some of their favorite moments and memories from the songs that were featured on the list. And in that episode, we'll play through probably the top 10 songs and we'll get everybody's take on the moment and we'll make it into like a legitimate episode this time. So it's something to look forward to at the end of the year. And it's something that you can be involved in. So if you've wanted to be involved with this podcast and give your take and opinion and just share along with everybody else and really be part of the wonderful community that we've helped build, then head on over. Let's do the holiday party. That's going to be one thing we do at the holiday party. I'm also working on a video package of some of the best of clips from tour documenting the whole entire year. It should be out very, very soon, if not as we're speaking right now. But the MSG tour documentary that I did is all done. So check our YouTube page if you want to go and check that out, because it's living life on the road. It's very cool stuff. Obviously, it's all my perspective and from me and my friends just being together and celebrating this band, but also it's just another taste of how we do things on tour. So yeah, if you want to check that out, that should be on YouTube right now. So make sure you bookmark that, subscribe to the YouTube channel and check that out. So I'll put together a package of some clips and do a little bit of that. I'll showcase a little bit of that. So that'll be part of the holiday party. We'll think of something else to throw in there as well. And there won't be any gift exchange this year, but that's okay because all we need is each other. And we've had each other all year. We've celebrated this all together. So let's just keep going, keep doing it, and enjoy each other's company. So that's going to be happening. It's going to be a Zoom event on December 19th. I will be making Facebook invites for anybody that wants the Zoom link. You can always email, message, or just join Patreon, and I'll post it on Patreon, or join the Facebook community group, the Pearl Jam podcast community group on Facebook, and I'll post it there too. So we are looking forward to it. Very, very excited for it. And again, hope to see you all there. It's all about getting involved, guys. All right, let's get involved in 5 more songs in this set and go back to the rock. Right into Who You Are, and then State of Love and Trust and Once Falling Up. It definitely felt like Who You Are had a little bit more pick me up than it usually does, or that it should in this era. I am more of a fan of the hypnotic Zen versions than more of a straight up rock version. I think it's more unique, especially live, when you can get that identity. It just feels like a completely different song for them. And this one kind of felt like they were turning it into a rock and roll rendition. And it's not my favorite on that, but you don't hear this song too much very often. So you take what you can get. But I liked when they were sticking true to what the original song style was at the time.
I'm with you. I think there's something to be said for the quote unquote the album version when they do that, but I really, really enjoy the song. And again, it's one that we can only dissect what Jack is doing and what Jeff is doing, and we kind of lose that here with the muddiness of the bootleg. But you can tell me this is kind of the standard for what they were doing with it at the time. They would come out and save who you are for the opening song and the encore. So that's no surprise. But this is another one that I really was hoping would come back this year. They've only done it once since 2016, the one time in Austin last year, but I really hope it hasn't been forgotten about because it can be really fun live.
I don't think anything is forgotten about. I think it just gets shelved for a little while. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this is not one that's going to show up every night or close to every night, but we'll see what happens. Just kind of put it on the back burner for now. And when it's time to bring it back, I think you'll get a lot of joy from it. So before going into State of Love and Trust, I think Ed is kind of shouting out the fastbacks because it sounded like he said something about the opening band. It is a little tough to tell, but that's kind of what I generated out of that. But both with State and Once, I think it's just still feeding off of the excitement of the end of the main set, and maybe Who You Are is a little bit too. Just a lot of good energy and good fuel. Even though it's like not that good of a boot quality, you can tell it's blossomed into a pretty damn good show at this point.
Oh, absolutely. And like you can picture the kids there just going wild, especially State of Love and Trust, even if you're not familiar with singles. I mean, that intro has such an energy to it that, yeah, people are going to get going. And Once being the first song that a lot of people heard by Pearl Jam always has a special moment, especially at a place where they've never played before. You're going to get these older songs at the end. They're going to give this crowd one more chance to sing along, even phonetically, to something that they know and that they're familiar with before they get out of there. And like, no cover songs at this show, which is interesting too. I think there were a couple of cuts I think we didn't mention, but Present Tense was on the set list after Better Man and got cut. Rockin' in the Free World was on the encore set list and got cut. But yeah, this is
Indifference,
just
I think,
like
was the original closer too, right?
Right. You're just giving this crowd another moment to kind of have something that they're familiar with and go crazy a little bit.
After Once, Ed is talking and it's unintelligible again, but I wonder if he's introducing the switcheroo here for Smile. So Smile is a really good feel good moment to have here as a buffer between the electricity of Once and what's going to be the electricity of Porch as well. And it's only the 9th performance of the song. And I remember the first few versions of this kind of felt maybe it was like a little bit sludgy, a little bit more of a plodding pace, and didn't have that ultimately positive mentality attitude towards it. I don't think it experienced it that, because this was not really played very early on in the no code era. They evolved into playing it a little bit more. I would not be surprised outside of I'm Open if this was the last song that they touched on the record. I don't think it was at that early Showbox show played.
Yeah, they saved it. They didn't play it until Europe. Yeah.
Right. So I guess maybe it's the facet of the switcheroo, and obviously they know how to play those instruments, but hearing this version, I didn't feel any of that sludginess or any of that trying to work it out. It felt like they had the positive mentality. It felt like there was a good bubbly environment. I'll say it here. I think my favorite part of the song was actually the way that it ends, because you know how the album version ends, how it just kind of trails after the chorus. They keep doing that riff and you hear Ed like very slightly in the background, don't it make you smile? And while it's fading out, we'll still do that, but it has more finality. But it felt like this version just found its way to sort of fade out after a while, just kind of trickle into that instead of having like a crash on this bar kind of bit. And I really like that. A fun version of Smile here to go into a very crazy, insane version of Porch.
They were feeling good about Smile. I mean, the very next version from Barcelona would end up on the fan club single from this year. So they knew that they had something with it and they were building up to that. So they knew that this was kind of a fun thing. And I like this version as well. It's got a little bit of that playfulness, which you don't always get from Pearl Jam around this time. So it gives you a little extra dimension of their sound that they can do like in the encore.
It says a little something before Porch that yet again you can't decipher, but they go right into it and we get to the solo, the bridge. It's a very interesting bridge that almost feels like it turns into another song midway through. They give you the idea of it and then they just kind of stop short and take a completely different direction on this. Almost in a way kind of felt a little bit dare I say like a little bit metal in a way, like it got a little dark and intense in spots, but there's an audible reaction somewhere too. I'm wondering because Ed, I think at some point says jump. I don't
He
know if
says,
you
should I
caught that.
jump?
Should
He
I
said,
jump?
should I jump? Yeah.
So I
I think
wonder
there's
if
definitely
he
some shenanigans happening.
did he get on top of something and that's what led the crowd
Yeah.
to sort of react like that, and he's improvising something during this too.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely some exploration happening on stage. And I think this is kind of by 95 pretty much stopped, but there's definitely something happening. He's going around on something because, yeah, I think there's even two moments where you can hear the crowd roar, and he's definitely channeling some of that 93, 94 energy on this.
It has a lot of different directions in the jam, and as everything kind of unfolds, like that's the ending I think that this show deserved. I think that the fans from Turkey, from Istanbul, really deserved to see this band and the element that they expected to see him in. So that is the one time only version of an Istanbul show. Now, let's get into the stuffs here. So I have my three, I think. And here's what I'm going to do with it. I'm going to say my number three is going to be Hail Hail because it's easy to put that towards the top because you had a legitimate rendition of it to hear good quality bootleg. So I think that helps its cause. And then Long Road is going to be number 2. Love this version of Long Road. My number 1, I think, is way too obvious. It's going to be Blood.
Yeah, I was kind of feeling very, very similar. My number 3, I'm actually going to go with Tremor Christ. That really impressed me from this show. So Tremor Christ number 3. Long Road is just too good not to put there. I really thought this was a standout version of Long Road. So I'm gonna put that in number 2, and then yeah, I mean you've got to put Blood at number 1.
Okay, so rating is really, really interesting for this. And this might surprise some people. So when digging into the first bit of the show, I'm listening to it. I'm like, man, if we can just get through this and have enough to talk about, then I think we'll be in good shape. Like, just get through this one. It was a tough listen. People have heard complaints about me and my ears lately, and my ears are still hurting. So that could have had something to do with my take of listening to this show. And I listened to it in one full sitting, but it was a little at times, because you're listening to the quality, a little excruciating. Like, it's only an hour and 45 minutes, but it felt like it could have been 3. And I was at like 10 songs into the set and thinking, like, when the hell is this going to end? And then all of a sudden, probably starts to spark around Jeremy. Something clicks. I'm like, oh, this show has something. This show has an identity, an it factor that's beyond what the bootleg quality presents. And then from there, the Long Road version happens, and that's spectacular. Sometimes to follow that, I mean, those are moments right there. And then, of course, Blood, which I did not expect to be anywhere close to the 9.5 minutes that the track had set for me. It blew me away. I haven't been that excited over the development of a song that I didn't know what was going to happen in such a damn long time, that it completely changed my perception of this show. I am probably a full 2 points higher than I was going to give this originally, and maybe 2.5, depending on how I was feeling at that moment. I don't know if this is going to be a surprise. It sounds like you might be on the same page as me. I don't know. I'm going to give this an 8.5. And potentially, if we had a good sounding bootleg, it could have been a 9. Like, I think it's almost there. But 8.5 for a bootleg that sounds like this, I think is super fucking impressive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this bootleg is F quality. Like, it is probably the worst one that we've done on the show so far that I can remember. And
New Zealand
yeah,
95 is pretty damn bad.
there have been a couple of bad ones, but this is down there. But yeah, I think it just shows they can transcend that. And like, when you listen to a lot of these, and people out there, you've probably listened to a lot of live Pearl Jam as well. Your brain can kind of fill in the blanks a little bit, and you know what you're listening to, and you know what to pick out, and you know what stands out to you. And I think there is a lot here for you to dig into if you spend the time. It's one of those that, like, yeah, it's probably doesn't get as much renown based on just the quality of it, but I think there's a lot there, and I'm almost there. I'm going to put this as an 8 because I think there is a lot to go back to, and it is a really, really good show again from this era. You're not going to get a lot of stinkers, but not a lot of crowd interaction, not a lot of things like you can nitpick, but there's so much stuff here. If they've got a recording of this in the vault, please release it. Like, this would be a great vault to show up and have a great recording of if they've got it somewhere on a DAT tape or whatever. But yeah, I'm going to put this right at an 8.
I think that's extremely impressive for a show like this. And I think that should tell something to you guys, that if we think pretty highly of it, then it's worth your while, even though it's not of the quality that you expect out of this band and out of bootlegs back in 96. But that's just kind of how it is sometimes. You can find the light within the darkness. Head towards the light because it's good sometimes. Okay, guys. From 1996, now we start the fun. All of December is going to be nothing but 2024 episodes. And the way that we're going to do it, it's all going to be decided by you, the listener. And it can either be on Patreon where you can vote, or it can be on the Pearl Jam podcast community where you can vote. And since Patreon is anonymous voting, you can vote on both platforms if you decided to. So here's what we're going to do. I think maybe it's not a secret to anybody that's seen the update of the results, but we're going to let those who might not be informed wait on it. We're going to let you wait until the notification comes in next Wednesday as to what episode you're going to get. So we're going to start out with the May run. So it can be it can't be the first Vancouver show because we did that months ago, but it can be the second. It can be either of the Sacramento or Portland shows. It could be either the LA shows. It could be either of the Vegas shows. It could be Bottle Rock, or it could be either of the Seattle shows. It was your decision. You came up with something, and it was a resounding win as well, which I was very shocked by. I was shocked that this won by the amount that it did, because I had one in mind that I probably would have voted for. And I mean, that one was maybe barely in second place. Yeah, that far behind. So it was a complete rout, and we'll just have to see what the other ones are going to be, because it'll be interesting to see what the next one is, because Europe, not a lot of people were very happy with those shows. It's probably going to be one of the Barcelona shows, because Dublin and Manchester, I'm not going to say anything, but you know what happened at the Manchester show. There's 2 festivals in Lisbon and Madrid. Those aren't going to win unless we really get a good amount of fan participation from those places. But it's probably going to be one of the Barcelona shows. So when we get to September, I think that's when we really start to duke it out a little bit. And then I think there's probably no contest when it comes to the Australia shows of what that episode is going to be. But we will hang on to that and let you stew over it and vote when the time comes to vote. Okay, so thank you all for tuning in. If you aren't subscribed to this podcast, please feel free to subscribe. I've looked at the numbers before, and it said that 86% of people that listen to this podcast are subscribed. And that's a very high total. Not a lot of podcasts have that. But for you 14% that aren't subscribed, there is nothing wrong with clicking that button and keeping up to what we're doing, because you just never know when things are going to come out, never know when news is going to happen, because anytime there is news, we are going to react. We're probably going to respond to it as well. So you can have that just waiting for you in your inbox, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can do it on Spotify, you can do it on Apple, you can do it on YouTube, or wherever else you decide to listen to a podcast. And then when you're there, please decide if you want to give us 5 stars. I think we've done the research. We've really done a lot of work over this, and we deserve it. Say it every week. So feel free. I encourage more people to do so, because it helps our algorithm out, and the algorithm is super important when it comes to these things. And also leaving comments. Anytime you can leave a comment and just let the next person know that wants to listen to this podcast what they're in for, then please let them know. That's what it's all about. It's about spreading the word of mouth, and your help is tremendous to that cause. All right. Well, we're leaving Istanbul because it is not Constantinople. The next time we have a Constantinople show, we will get to it, and maybe it'll be in pretty good quality. Who knows? But this is the end. We're here. We're not for much longer. Though we may be parting ways. Miss you already. Miss you always. So if you're listening to this on Wednesday night, just a little note here that tonight on the Pearl Jam Podcast Community Group on Facebook and on the Touring Fan Live YouTube channel, we will be streaming the return of Destined to Remember. We're so excited to do this. It's a full tour rundown with myself Anthony of Touring Fan Live, and of course, Dave Jantausch of Live Footsteps. We are so excited because, first of all, good friend Anthony is finally back on the mend. He's healthy and he's ready to do this, and we're really excited to be back in the same room with him and talk to him because I just miss the guy so much. He's one of my best friends, and really excited to do that and run down the whole entire year and talk about some really fun things. So if you want to check that out, then you can over on the Pearl Jam Podcast community group on Facebook, or subscribe to the Touring Fan Live on YouTube. I wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving, everybody. This is that time of year where it's going to start the holiday season, and I hope that you celebrate it all with your family and loved ones and have an amazing weekend. As I said, next week starts the good stuff. It's 2024. Until then, see you on the pod.
It's nobody's business but the Turks.
Constantinople. No, you can't go back to Constantinople. Been a long time gone. Constantinople, why did Constantinople get the works? That's nobody's business but the Turks. Istanbul.